then there were these people who were, I mean, Sting is committed to...
Sure, I'm not putting down any of the characters. I'm just saying that it's unfortunate that the word can't continually be spread.
Sure.
Like, I could have had his stuff exposed to millions and millions of people. I sort of do, but if I was in it, it'd be a little more powerful, you know, to know that we can produce organic...
It's about joining forces, you know.
Sure.
It's about inclusivity and not exclusivity.
Exactly. The monetary system confirms exclusivity.
Right.
And competitiveness.
And
versus
competitiveness,
collaboration.
absolutely. And why Sting would restrict something like that is also problematic.
Well, that's Sting's ego.
Okay.
You know, that's like Sting's battalion of managers. I don't mind that.
I'm just kidding.
I'm saying this. So
Oh, I did that.
Anyway, very good though. I mean, I don't put down anyone in the sense of I understand the way people operate in this system. Everyone does what they have to do, and I look at even the most vile company like Monsanto as, in fact, just another example of the matter of degree of what this system creates. That's all they are. It's just a matter of degree. So I try to convince people that I talk to that they hone in on singular corporations. And by the way, I think that you need to be activity-oriented against some of these people.
I think that all those corporations should be targets of
absolutely, but you can't.
They should not be spared.
You cannot. But the only problem is that you have to make sure that the larger order point is always made, that these are products of a system and the symptoms exactly. So that's what I would say about that.
It's an endless battle when you pick out corporations like that and continuously try and stop that. You might get some legislation through, and then when the next government comes in, it'll revert right back. That's really not the problem, the solutions to the problems. We really need to advocate a total world, global, resource-based economy. And to the extent that we don't advocate that and work toward that, that will determine the amount of problems that we will have remaining.
When few nations control most of the Earth's resources, others will try to invade and get a piece of the cake.
Which is what's happening right now.
So you have no intelligent plans out there. The more intelligent, the higher the order of intelligence, meaning better management of the Earth's resources, the more difficult to reach people. People understand things like, it's our country, right or wrong, let's get out there and defend it. They'll join with that. But people say to me, Jacque, every time I ask you a question, I get a lecture, not an answer. Because there are no answers. There's no simple answer. It's very involved. And the average person is not equipped to handle that. That's why I keep saying there'll be a lot of trouble ahead, a lot of assassinations, wild people, groups breaking windows. They don't know what else to do. Right. They don't know how to handle problems. Like in the Arab world, a guy may beat his wife 3 times a week to a pulp to get her to obey him. That's normal to that culture. They don't know anything else. Now, giving women equal rights is unthinkable in that type culture. Do you understand? So you've got the scar tissue of hundreds of years in people. And you don't come out and one day say, oh, here's the answer, even if it were the answer. If they don't understand it, it's not the answer.
Right.
What they do is the answer.
Right.
And if they kill each other, which is what I think they will do, and there may be few people that can escape the system. All I can talk about is what happened during the Depression. There were many men sleeping in the winter over gratings in front of hundreds of them, and that bothered Al Capone. And he opened the first soup kitchen. Did you know that? More than the federal government. Was he evil? In some areas, yes. In other areas, no. So Al Capone started feeding people. And then the Italian Americans were feeding one another. And then the Jews pulled into their own corner. And the Irish were beaten up because during the potato famine, a lot of Irishmen came to America and they worked for 1/2 the amount what Americans worked for. So Americans said, those goddamn Irishmen, let's beat them up because they're taking our jobs away. The whole reason for aberrant behavior is fear of scarcity or unemployment. During the Depression, there was a factory that had signed help wanted, and I saw lines all around the block. And the guys would say, hey, let's get rid of that fat Jew. Let's get rid of that Irishman. Let's get rid of that Arab. But during the war, they wanted all the help they can get. They didn't care who was in line, as long as there was jobs for everybody. So you're dealing with social chaos, and there's no clean line that people will follow. So whatever happens is real. What you think should happen is unreal. And that's what people get disappointed in. Not the world. Whatever the world does is real. Whatever happens is real. What you think should have happened disappoints you. H.G. Wells, in his book, The Shape of Things to Come, he died broken-hearted. He said the world should be so far along. He suffered from his own projections. The world will do what it does, not what Fresco thinks is right or Peter Joseph thinks is right. They will do whatever the hell they have to do to survive. Whether you'll see a saner world is highly improbable unless you begin to talk. All the people that come to these meetings, if they talk to other people and advise them in different directions, bear with them, stay with them until they understand. If everybody works at it, the transition will be less painful, not eliminated. I'm sorry that I have this to say. I'd like to say I see glorious days ahead. That will please everybody, but it's not true.
I don't think it's so much that we're optimistic or pessimistic. I think we're really scared shitless as to what's happening and what's happening now and what the immediate future might bring. And we see a viable alternative that could eliminate a lot of suffering for a lot of people, so we're advocating it and asking other people to look into it and learn it and talk to others about it and get the information out there any way we can. Movies, books, radios, internet, while we still have the ability to do that.
Now, have you considered working with other movements? You know.
Well, people ask that question as some.
There are so many of them.
They make a. Well, the thing is, I've yet to meet a movement, if you will, or an activist group that actually really identifies with the complete direction. And it's not to say that they are. Frankly, the one attribute that any organization that, any organization that I think could possibly come in line with this, the one attribute they have to get definitively is the fact that the monetary system is the root of most of the problems, if not all the problems that we generally face on a severe level. That is it. And no, Greenpeace, all the environmental organizations, they think that if they go after the corporations that they can influence, even WikiLeaks is an interesting example because they're exposing. Always exposing. I hate to say it, and I said this last night, months from now, no one's going to remember a damn thing.
That's not true.
Well, I think
disagree. I really strongly disagree.
if they remember it, it's not going to change a damn thing.
It won't change anything, but he will have left some sort of indelible...
Oh, I agree with that. Let me rephrase that. I forget to say remember. Remember is not... There will be a fall of confidence in many different levels because of those releases, which are viably so. But the general consciousness of the public, general awareness of the public, it goes through them because of, and has there been any prosecutions because of that? Not that I've heard of. Has there been anything that has really culminated because of the really severe things that were revealed in those cables?
The only prosecution has been the one of Bradley Manning. That is it.
That's right.
So if there is a prosecution, there is a young man
in the other direction.
12 by 10 jail cell, right?
So, and my point is that the goal here is to provide a solution, not to talk about problems anymore. I spent that time in Zeitgeist and even Zeitgeist Addendum. That's why I barely talk about, like, I bring it up like Wall Street and stuff, but it's not focused on as though I'm trying to like expose. I don't believe that's the route to do.
But don't you think that in the grand cosmology of things, that we're all connected and that we have our own part to play?
Well, of course.
Fit that puzzle, make it work.
Well, by all means, but I think my point is more of a central strategy, an effective strategy, and that is actually showing a new direction, not advocating, not constantly exposing. So back to my point about activist groups and other organizations, they're constantly harping on what they think is right and what right or ethical or what government should do, in the sense that it's all contained within the system. It's never. What do they say about ecological organizations? Say we need to do this, this, and this. We need the money to do it, and they look for money, and that's what everyone essentially does. We need more funding so we can fight these fish loitering ships for Greenpeace. They frame everything in the system not knowing that the system itself is the problem. And what they also do is they create their own establishments. And this is something else I've run into with contacts of many organizations that I won't name. They see what we advocate. They have thousands of employees, pseudo-volunteer employees. They still get paid. Many of these organizations that are nonprofit naturally still get paid. Nonprofit is just a subset of profit. It's just less profit is all it really means. So they're in a world where they're surviving off of their activism, and that's a big problem. They have a career in fighting the problem, and there are some radio talk show hosts that advocate
That's
things
us.
that.
I mean, we're not, even pretending. I mean, I'm surviving.
I just want to point that out for the sake of those that are listening, that we create establishments, and the larger the establishment becomes, such as the global warming establishment, such as the cancer establishment. Let's resolve cancer. You know how many trillions of dollars and how many thousands and thousands of people will be out of work if someone, and by the way, these resolutions do exist. I won't go into that. They've been around for decades, but they're completely ignored and they're prosecuted, and the doctors are anyway, it's a long tangent. Anything they can do to stop servicing problems is how things work, and it goes for the activist community as well. So these are the types of things that I hope any group will, if any group realizes that, they say, we recognize the monetary system is the problem, then by all means, they can come in. And frankly, I hope they would just come in under the umbrella of the zeitgeist movements. You don't have to worry about these two different organizations and people getting confused by different names. I could easily make a list of organizations that are in harmony with us, but within the movement. So you don't have like this abstract partnership and all these different, it's an ego thing. There are people that have already broken away from the Venus Project and the movement because they have their own ego. They're like, we're going to do our own thing. We don't like this aspect, and it's so counterproductive. It's self-defeating.
That goes back to the cultural aspect that's so hard to change. We're all conditioned to have that kind of ego mentality when we're pitted against each other for survival and we have to compete. It's only natural that everybody wants to glorify themselves or have their own independence and everything.
And importance.
So
That's what's been reinforced in this system since the moment they're born. Is reinforced competition.
I think
It's a natural response in the system.
In the system.
It's not a human response.
Right, exactly. That's what I meant.
Some of our lessons may come from people. There are people on this earth that are just barely in this system.
Sure.
It does still exist, and so it's not maybe that they have the entire program as far developed as like what you're discussing.
Sure.
But let's say the Zapatistas, which are just people living in the jungle that don't want to hear about the government systems, they don't want to hear about money, they don't want to hear about any of that shit.
Sure.
They just want to all go about their lives. They're remarkably participatory in their governmental thing or whatever. Versus in Argentina, when their economy went down, and there's a question about the degree of collapse. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it collapses somewhat, but a government can still pay its soldiers and its police, that's one thing.
Sure.
If it collapses more, and when they cannot pay their policemen anymore and they cannot pay their soldiers anymore, this is something else.
Well,
and you end up in a situation in Argentina where people were going back into the factories and reopening them on their own, just because it's like there's resources all around me. I'm going to go to work. And they get in these fights with the guy who thinks he owns the place from before, or whatever. But sometimes I think at an individual level, and in some of these other more I don't know how far-flung Argentina is per se, but it's not New York City anyway, and it's not London.
Right.
And they're coming from a different social upbringing and different culture, or whatever.
Non-materialistic.
Let's say less materialistic.
Sure.
Well, I wouldn't say that about Argentina.
I don't know about Argentina, but in
Sure,
other
well,
examples,
I
there's also interesting examples in the Soviet Union when it collapsed, where factories started these really elaborate barter chains because they didn't know what else to do.
Right.
So like one factory that made tires would call up somebody that made trucks and be like, can we give you tires? And then the people who made trucks would call the company that made sugar and be like, I don't know, do you need trucks? And they'd work out these elaborate barters.
One thing I'd like